So let me get oriented here. Yes, we are representing the Texas Well Owner Network, and I am a part of a team that goes out and delivers programs along with Drew, program specialist. John Smith, we actually do have a John Smith that works on our team. He's for real. And Ryan Gerlich, and I'll be telling you more about their roles as we go through the talk. So many of you have seen slides, how many millions of wells do we have in our state? If only we knew, and if only we knew how many abandoned wells are in the state. But let's say 1 million, that's a nice round number, right? So about 1 million, maybe to about 2.3 million people in Texas providing water. This is about 8% of our population and maybe 20% of the population living outside of city limits. And since Texas is the new home for about 1,200 people every day, that number is expanding, especially as our city limits and those boundaries where people are living in the rural-urban interface expands, and we start to get septics and wells in those areas. This number we kind of move around with a little bit. We used to do fecal coliform, and that was a little bit higher, about 10%. We've switched over to E. coli, and it usually runs around 5 to 10%. So when we run those results together, it comes out to about 10%. And of course, the MCL for drinking water is 0. And we also look at nitrates, and as I get into the talk, you'll see that we will look at some other things too. But Texas is a big place. There's a lot of variability, like there is in many of your states. And in some areas, it can be as high as 50%. Other areas, as low as 2% hits on the nitrates. We have a couple of ways, at least, in which we present the information, and there's actually many other iterations based on what the agent wants, what the watershed coordinator wants, who we're in service of in that particular day when we go out. And this conference has been great. It's been a fabulous period, but it's been great to have this interaction with so many sanitarians and public health specialists, and that's letting me know maybe I need to make more of an effort to also coordinate with our county health departments when we go out. We do usually try to make an attempt. Many of our counties don't have county health departments, and they're extremely busy, and so we especially appreciate all of your presence here today. But maybe if we twist our arms a little harder, that might be yet another way of generating a very productive partnership. To get back to my slide, so we have an all-day format that's funded where we'll do an educational program that lasts at least, well, can be 4 hours, can be as short as 2 hours, and up to 6 hours of training. And I'll go over those topics in just a minute. The carrot that we use to bring people through the door is water sample screening, and some of the results are available just that day on site. And we cover at least 8 topics in that longer format program. Sometimes a county extension agent in general will say, or in particular, will say, you know, I just don't think people will want to show up for that much time. And so we have a shorter format where the educational program is just an hour in the evening. And that doesn't involve a whole team of people having to go out. Just one member of the team can usually handle running out and doing the program, bringing the samples back in for bacteria incubation. And sometimes that's a screening. Sometimes the agent will prefer that it's actually what we call a water sample campaign. And those samples, in that case, all the water samples will be brought in and brought to our ag lab. And we'll do the full panel through that venue or through that avenue instead of doing the on-site testing. Both of these types of educational delivery have an interpretation aspect where they have some of their results in front of them. We try not, we're extension, so we have to be nice and give people their results back when they want them, but we really try to hang on to them until the educational meeting so that they come to the meeting. They don't know all the things that they need to know. We know some of them, but we need them to hear them and come to the meeting. And so that's one way we get them to come, is that we share their results at the meeting. But of course, we share them before and after if they need other places, need to be in other places. And on the shorter format program, of course, we're limited in time, so we try to focus on wellhead protection. What we might cover in 20 minutes in the longer format might be reduced to just one slide in the shorter format. So here's an example of a meeting. This one, I think, was in Wimberley, Texas. and it's there's our septic specialist doing some education there. I don't think you can see probably the detail. This is just a typical agenda. It's different every single time we go out because of different times, as I said. But also we like to start the program with the watershed coordinator, actually. And that goes to our major source of funding that I'll talk about in a little bit. So often we're going out in support of surface water quality of all things. So I'll explain a little bit about that angle. So this particular one didn't have a watershed coordinator involved. Maybe there wasn't a protection planning effort going on. I don't remember the details. Where were we? Right, there wasn't. And so that's why the coordinator wasn't there. We start off with a kind of a general run through aquifers in Texas. We don't spend too much time on that because they're really only interested in their own aquifer. And sometimes we're able to hand that part of the presentation actually off to the Underground Water Conservation District or the Groundwater Conservation District representative that's there. That's something that's different about Texas, and it could be that Drew will get a little bit more into this if his slides give him that opportunity, but not every place in Texas is covered by a groundwater conservation district, but many counties or multiple counties or even sub-aquifer areas are covered by this initially grassroots effort to vote in a taxable, or they have taxing authority. They may not tax, they may be fee-based instead, but form of government. And so that's how groundwater is managed at the local level in Texas. So we are very excited to have the Groundwater Conservation District, usually general manager. Sometimes they even have an education outreach coordinator that comes instead. Be with us because there are 254 counties in Texas. We're not going to be back the next year. And we need to be able to say, who are the people that they can go to locally for information on their aquifer, on for their well when we leave. This is also the organization that may need their wells that they may need to register their wells with, or even get a permit from, depending on the rules of the groundwater district, and they're all different. And so they have a lot of flexibility. Some of them are very well-staffed and very organized, and others are very shoestring budgets and really don't even have much of a web presence. So it really varies. But we are fortunate to have those in Texas. Then we'll often take a break, and after, usually before lunch, so it's not that great for their appetites, but we'll embed an hour talk from our on-site septic system specialist. And why do we do that? Well, as you all know, the local maintenance of the local wastewater treatment facility, the septic system, is very important to water quality in the local water plant. So we are actually trying, this is our main message actually, it's a little backwards from how many of you might have gotten into it, but what we're actually trying to do is reduce the discharge of E. coli or bacteria, the most frequent cause of impairments in Texas, into surface water of all things. So when you start a watershed protection planning effort in the United States, the first thing that happens is that the planning group gets together and there's stakeholders from the local community there. And the first thing they want to know is the wastewater treatment plant in compliance? And what about all those leaking septic systems? And so they have a point. At any time, about roughly, I see different numbers, but about 20% of our septic systems are failing. And so this is a huge concern for water quality. Some of that potential contamination is attenuated by the soil, yeah, but some of it isn't. And that's why, it shows up in our streams and we have those impairments. So we're really trying to get the message out to people to take care of their septic systems, but people don't come to those kind of trainings. They come to a well training because they're interested in their family's drinking water usually. And so that's why we're able to get a little bit of information sandwiched in the program that may do a lot of good to keep their drinking water healthy and also to protect surface water quality. After the break, we've had some time to do our on-site testing of water, screening of water, I should say, and we have the paperwork done and are ready to return those results to people. So they have some results in front of them, not the bacteria results. And we go through what are the standards, when, where, and why do you test, and that kind of thing. And we also talk about water treatment options in very generic terms. We are fortunate that we can sometimes find a vendor to travel with us, so that's valuable. And we are fortunate in Texas that we do have our state, one of our state natural regulatory agencies, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, has begun educating and testing water treatment specialists at 3 different levels. And so we're able in Texas, we also have the Water Quality Association that we can point to and has been mentioned several times in this conference for where people can go to get treatment that they trust, and the National Sanitation Foundation. But we're in Texas, we're able to say, go onto this database, search for, hopefully, if you can find one nearby you, a water treatment specialist 3, and they can, if it's going to turn out that you need a reverse osmosis system, they're actually certified. They have the license to install, maintain, or repair that equipment in your home. In Texas, you can do it yourself, but nobody else except plumbers are exempt, and they may or may not know what's good water treatment equipment for you. But a plumber or a water treatment specialist in Texas are the only people who are legally authorized to install water treatment equipment in your home, and that excludes well drillers unless they also have this license for water treatment, for being a water treatment specialist. So many of them are getting their licensing for water treatment too, because they do want to continue selling water treatment equipment. They're asked for it by their customers. So that's increasing. We have about, I would say 600, I think, something in there, in that range, water treatment specialist 3s in Texas. The water treatment specialist 2s are only able to install up to water softeners, so you're much better off with a water treatment specialist 3. So we're fortunate in that regard in Texas. I did speak to someone from the Water Quality Association who is here, and she said she thought that was maybe the only state so far, but there may be efforts in your state to begin that kind of licensing, which is very helpful for the public. Those guys generally wear the white hats, and so we feel comfortable pointing to that database and saying, go work with one of those vendors. Our topics, as I've already mentioned, include kind of a basic Aquifer 101, watersheds and aquifers, since that's where our primary funding comes from. Private water well basics, of course, on-site wastewater treatment. Water quantity, so a little bit about productivity from wells. Water quality and testing, water treatment options, and then a wrap up with protecting your water supply. We screen for, and again, like so many of them here, we are a mobile lab. We would not pretend to be NELAC certified. We're trying to increase their awareness of where their local lab is to go for additional testing. We think our results are representative, but we would always recommend before any money might be spent on treatment or any other expensive actions taken, that definitely get a retest. So we screen for E. coli bacteria, nitrate nitrogen, total dissolved solids, and for a drinking water sample in locations where we are anticipating arsenic will be an issue, we'll offer an arsenic screening too. And it's always, any of those are always available upon request, but we emphasize the arsenic more in certain areas of Texas where we know it could be a problem. The education program includes an explanation of results, discussion of wellhead protection, and as I mentioned, we're just trying to get them more familiar with the process of getting their water tested, and that they have, or they can choose to have, a personal responsibility for taking care of their well water and also protecting the aquifer, this community resource. We have many program partners, and I think it's been said here before, I think Aaron said if it wasn't for the partners, these projects wouldn't happen or they wouldn't be as successful. We are Extension, and so we certainly wouldn't want to go into a county or several counties for a multi-county program without coordinating with the county extension agent. So often the extension agent is actually kicking off the program, hosting us, and facilitating attendance by advertising. So they're a huge resource. And we help them by providing a water program that they can check off. We're survivors of a very severe drought. It's getting to be 5 or 6 years ago, but it definitely has left a scar on Texans. And I think the Californian that's here, it'll take her a long time. It'll take your state a long time to get over that, even after lots of wet years. And hopefully they never will get over it, and will make some changes in how they manage water. But those county extension agents in Texas are required to do at least one water program a year. So we're able to help them check that box off. There's a new initiative in Texas called Healthy South Texas, and this is really exciting to us because it's opened the door for extension to more fully. We just recently brought our medical school into the Texas A&M system to work more directly with. So now we're able to work with the School of Public Health more closely, and this gives us a different angle that may be more meaningful to much of the public. And so we're excited about doing programs through those agents. Those are a different batch of agents in Texas. And it started with the south of Texas, where they prioritize because of more pressing, I guess, health issues. But they are planning to expand it to the entire state. And so we're excited about kind of being on the ground floor of that. For those of you who are at institutions that have water resources institutes, you might think about partnering with them. They have other contacts that can be helpful. And actually on the grant that primarily supports this program, the Texas Water Resource Institute is the lead agency or organization, and we're subbed under them. We do the large majority of the work, but they help us with key components such as press releases, the coding on the website, et cetera. We also have partnerships with federal and state agencies. So finally, I'll get to a little more details. Our main funding comes from this is not just doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but Texas State Soil and Water Conservation Board. This is one of the 2 state delegates in Texas for the Clean Water Act. The other is the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. And those funds come from EPA. So ultimately, the funding is federal. And so, as I mentioned, someone here had already said that EPA's major interest in source water protection is actually protecting public water system quality. Similarly, the EPA has an interest in surface water quality, and so that's why they're interested in this particular approach to get rural well owners and septic system owners to maintain their septic systems more appropriately to protect surface water quality and reduce runoff that could result in E. coli being discharged to streams. We have watershed protection plan partnerships. That's what starts or initiates this entire effort in a community. They have an impairment generally that's been assessed by the TCQ, and they need to address it. And so they start with watershed protection planning, and they bring in different programs to bring the public up to speed so that they can participate fully as stakeholders. And so we're part of that with the rural audience, or the audience that has wells in the rural-urban interface. In Texas, we don't tend to have wells in urban areas like in some other parts of the country. I've mentioned groundwater conservation districts are key partners. River authorities are also key players in Texas in certain areas, and many of them operate as utilities and even have their own labs. So sometimes that is the local lab, is the river authority to send people to. And then another mouthful here, the Texas Groundwater Protection Committee, Public Outreach and Education Subcommittee. I'm a co-chair on that, but we meet quarterly, and there are 8 state agencies that have conversations and action items regarding what do we think are important issues in Texas, and what can we do as a group, to make these things happen. And already I had a wonderful insight from Rhode Island at this conference, and I plan to bring that to that subcommittee and see if we can work through these different agencies to get different water quality standards actually applied during real estate transactions in Texas. Testing that needs to occur is definitely not occurring, but we might be able to make that happen. We'll see. Our Texas Well Owner Network, so far we've had, since the major funding in 2010 or 11, whenever it started, about 7,000 participants. This program actually, in a different form, was begun by a different specialist back in 1998, I believe. And so overall, we have about 11,000 to 12,000 participants by now. We've done 48 of the full day or well-educated programs and 72 of the more nimble, well-informed programs where we can just send one team member out to do a short program associated with the screening. E. coli and fecal coliform, this number is moving around a little bit, but depending on what we're reporting, but 10 to 12%, and then if we're just looking at E. coli, it's more like 5%. 62% of our results will exceed either the primary or secondary standards set for public drinking water systems. A lot of that is actually TDS, exceeding the 500 parts per million criteria, but there are other hits for bacteria, of course, and nitrates and arsenic. And that was as of April. This graphic almost behaved itself completely. So if you look at primary water use, the major use for water for those people that come to our programs is domestic. So they're bringing it into their homes. About a fifth of them are using it for livestock. Only 8% for irrigation, which was a surprise. I think when it says domestic, we can assume if they're going to irrigate their yard, they're including that. But there are some primarily irrigation wells in Texas too. The primary place of residence, and I guess that's on the left for you, are mostly rural properties less than 10 acres. So that tells us these are the people that have moved out of town and they've got a bigger home site now, and they just inherited probably or just purchased a septic system and a water well, and they're honest enough to know that they don't know how to manage it, and so they're showing up at an extension program, thank goodness, and they're eager for information. They're usually very appreciative of the program. And then there's the next larger category are farm and ranch, about 10 to 100 acres are covered. And then less so for our larger ranchers at over 100 acres. But in some parts of Texas, there are a lot of people that have a lot of land, and so that is, we probably should look at the instead of the mean, the median instead. Program evaluations, we are, as someone else has mentioned, under a lot of pressure in extension to report outcomes. And so we have a two-phase approach. We do a pre-test and a post-test after our educational program. And we also have done a 6-month delayed questionnaire. We are going to switch that over to a 1-year time frame in the upcoming grant. And I'll show you some of those results. And we want to evaluate knowledge gained and satisfaction with the program, of course, and we're going to ask them for their intentions to adopt the best management practices that we've just talked about. And then in the 6-month or the year time frame that we're going to switch to, we're going to look at what actions did they actually adopt. Before I blow through these photos, I just wanted to show you that there's a well house photo here that Drew found, and this was completely unstaged. You can see the pressure tank there, and I don't know if I can use the, there's the wellhead on this one. I can't get it through the, okay, on the other one. But the wellhead is right there by the pressure tank. And then you can see the gasoline container securely sitting on the bag of trash or leaves or whatever that is, clothing, who knows what's in there. A pumper for herbicides. There's in the shelf there, I think it's cut off at a gas or a paint can, excuse me, and some rust. So in Texas, we don't have basements, and so there's never enough storage. Probably there isn't at most places. And so the pump houses tend to get full of stuff. And that's the last thing in some cases that you would like to have right by the wellhead for your family's drinking water supply. This is another meeting. I think this one was maybe in Killeen. I'm not sure. So as others have reported here, when we ask participants, have they ever tested their water, 80% have never tested it, or they've tested it once. And usually if you press them on it, they'll say, well, I think the driller tested it when the well was drilled. The knowledge change score, the knowledge change score has increased 30%. We're never quite sure how to talk about that, but the result has increased 30% from the initial result, and they are satisfied with the program. So those are the easy ones. Our 6-month follow-up results are showing that I guess we must do a pretty good job. We show them some other well houses, but 90% have said that they've at least done the relatively easy thing on their honey-do list of maybe taking a weekend and cleaning out the hazards from their well house. And so we've eliminated, at least hopefully, some of the pesticides or whatever potential contaminants might be stored near the wellhead. So that's a good number, 90%. 74% had actually moved contamination sources, so that's bigger things, not just the pump house. That's maybe they moved the dog run or any one of the land use changes that we describe during our presentation. They've actually removed it and made a change in how their homestead is set up. We find this remarkable here, and there's I didn't make a change there, but 38% of participants had plugged their unused or deteriorated wells, and then an additional 38%, it says plan to pump soon, but plan to plug soon, it should say. And this is really remarkable. The abandoned well, or the not properly decommissioned well in Texas, is considered by that mouthful, the Texas Groundwater Protection Committee, the major source of groundwater contamination in Texas. And so we really want to get those unplugged wells that are not being used plugged. And for our participants to go out, and sometimes we have NRCS there or the groundwater district, much more likely, may have cost share to help individuals get their well plugged. So we're able through this program to get those people together, and they're actually getting their wells plugged that are abandoned. And so that's huge, and we're very proud of that number. We're also very proud of this number, that half within the 6-month window of our 2 previous grants had actually pumped their septic system, and another 30% are planning to pump soon. So that's at no public expense. There's actually grants in Texas. They're not abundant, but there are grants where cities will try to get people to repair or pump out their septic systems, and those lack for takers. People don't want to step up and let the city know that, ooh, maybe I do need to be pumping my septic and I haven't. And so they really have to beat the bushes to give that money away. But this happened during a well owner educational program at no public expense. They went and took care of it themselves. And so we're very proud of that statistic too. And then one more, they are sharing, and this is the network part to us, that they're sharing their resources with other people. And we encourage them to put our materials maybe in their neighbor's mailbox, but that's about as far as we want them to go with pressing their knowledge on their neighbor. We're a little nervous in Texas of maybe neighbors getting into some disputes as far as who considers their land use appropriate and how it might be affecting each other's wells. So some neutral information placed in a mailbox might be about as far as we'd like them to go with that. What's the one that I'm missing here that we've talked about over and over? Anybody notice? Whether or not you've had your well tested. So and that's the main reason we're switching to a full year, and that is because we think the numbers are low. Were they like 30% or something? It's not as high as we'd like to toot our horns about, and we think the reason is, well, they're just at a program where they feel they've screened their water, and so if within 6 months, if we ask them, well, have you tested your water? Unless they're retesting because of a result they got from us, they're probably not going to have done it. So we're going to a year time frame on that instead. And this will be my last slide before I hand it over to Drew. How do we fund this? And we charge $10 for screening supplies replacement is what we use it for. Actually, what we use it for is to make sure people come to the program. It's kind of odd, but we find if we offer it for free, we just don't get the participation that we anticipate. And I think that's because people feel it's a program for the poor and they don't want to take up those slots, and $10 is acceptable. It could also be that when we put it out there for free, then maybe that's not a value. We're not showing a value on it, and so they decide it's not of any value too. So I'm not sure what the psychology is on that. Maybe there's some sociologists here, but we find a better participation at a low cost for a low cost fee. My primary cost is for personnel. We are soft funded as far as the program specialists are concerned and the travel costs. And so, of course, salaries and fringe are going to be a huge cost each year. So that's why we are constantly looking for new angles, new missions to absorb in order to help other project partners accomplish their missions and get people's paychecks out to them. So as I've already gone over this, that we're actually funded by EPA through the Clean Water Act, a 319H grant, and through a pass-through grant through one of the state agencies, the Texas State Soil and Water Conservation Board. We also receive a small amount of funding from the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, SARE, Sustainable Ag Research and Education, a little bit from RCAP, Rural Community Assistance Program, that we're very grateful for. Sometimes we can kill two birds with one stone, now that I'm talking about Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, in that we have a youth program that we are going to start or have started doing some testing for kids. So we've had to buy some more probes. Well, there's no reason why we won't be able to use some of those probes to do our work when we go out and are doing a well owner network program too. And the watershed protection planning efforts, if any of you are in a position to get one of these grants in your state, they're usually very large grants and well funded, and often they can't find enough people to give these funds to. There aren't that many researchers that do them because there's a huge applied part, although there's often graduate students that are folded into these grants. So they're often well funded, and so in some cases they can't help me with salary, but they'll say, well, we'll pay your travel to come out there, and so that's very helpful for us to be able to get out to the watershed that they are focusing on. So I think I'll turn this over to Drew, and he'll get into lessons learned and outreach strategies.
All right. Good morning. I'm going to talk about lessons learned, and Diane just talked about funding, but what I'm going to focus on when I think about lessons learned, and when I talk to Steve about going through Texas Well Owner Network and what the lessons we've learned and how we've changed and evolved with our program, I'm focusing in on the individual program itself. So like the day of the workshop and how that can be, how can we make that the most successful and get the most folks there, the most outreach that we can. I think that right after I finished my HR training when I first got hired on, the second thing I did was call Aaron at Virginia with the extension there, and that's got us started with the program the most. I mean, just see what they do and use everything that maybe applies that I could use for Texas, but then, switch and change what we think would work for Texas and with the folks there in Texas. And so that's the program as a large view and how we can make that successful. But when I look at making individual workshops successful, there's these are the things that just popped up in my head that I felt like I spent the most time on trying to get buy-in from local involvement. Makes it key. Type of well owners, program marketing. Private well owners, as everyone here knows, are hard to reach and hard to get a hold of. And so what avenues can we use to reach them? Program duration, we talked about, Diane talked a little bit about that. And then in the news and engaging well owners outside of our programs, outside of our events. So the impact of local involvement, one large thing that we see, probably one of the biggest that affects attendance, I think, is the county agent. We use each county agent when we go into all of the counties that we go to. And we talked about this last night, if a county agent calls me and says, we'd love to do a program here, and they're enthusiastic about it, and they're wanting it there, it's going to make the program so much more successful than me calling and say, we're going to come here on this date and jump on. And so maybe they're busy or they're not totally bought into the program. But if they are, it can make a large difference on the connections that they have, the energy that they have to go out and promote the program. And it's a big difference on the numbers that we see to get folks to come into our program. Diane talked about the surface water component, our watershed coordinators. And so we involve them, get them involved. They have an email listserv, and they're on the ground running around. They have their group, and a lot of times it's a separate group from our county agents. And so if we can tap into them as well. And Diane mentioned groundwater conservation districts in Texas, and that's the map showing there on your right. And so not all counties have groundwater conservation districts, and they're the management of the groundwater in Texas. So it varies whether they're going to be involved a lot or not, whether financially or whether they have a large listserv. But the point of going through all these is everybody has their own group that they can connect to, and they have their emails, or they have an avenue to reach people. And I spend most of my time reaching out to these and coordinating through all of them to make sure they're involved, but also they're doing everything that they can to try to reach out. And so we're trying to hit the private well owners from any angle that we can to get them reached and acknowledging of the workshop that we're about to have. County health departments, using them for lab services. We also have local labs that we bring in. So if we go to a certain area, they may actually partner, and they're going to be doing the testing for us in this certain area. And so they've now been introduced to their local lab. And so when we leave, and we're not going to be coming back for probably a few years if we do come back, and so they're not going to be using us every time. So now they've been introduced to their local lab. And then also master gardeners, naturalists, churches, environmental organizations, just working the phones and emails to trying to figure out how we can reach out to these people, these groups, to reach these private well owners the best that we can. And then in turn, it all depends on what they have available, but financial support. It may be from supplying coffee in the morning to lunch or paying for our travel. It varies, but they're all willing to help out the best that they can. And so that's been a large benefit to us, to have everything set up. Maybe it's a venue cost, and a lot of these local involvement, that's their way to contribute, besides if they have a segment of speaking, is to help us out with that. Before I go in an area, I try to figure out what type of well owner that the majority of them are. So what's my target audience? We have to consider what's the main source of, is it drinking water? Diane showed we've had a small sliver of irrigation. When we go into certain areas of Texas, they're going to be on rural water supply, and they do have maybe a large number of private water wells, but they're not drinking it. So they're not going to be concerned with the headlines that we put out, of the press releases that we put about safety in drinking water. So we may tailor our program to water quality that's still important, but how does that maybe affect what they're irrigating? And there's certain areas in Texas that we see large groups moving to outside of the cities, in the hill country, for an example, in Texas, and they're just a different group that we may target differently, use different ways to reach them, and timing of that program, how we're going to go about how we're going to use the emails, or how we're going to do the marketing strategies to reach those folks. Subdivisions, we're having large growth outside the edges of the larger cities in our subdivisions. You can here see an example of each house in this HOA that all have water wells. And so how can I contact that HOA, or can I get someone that lives in there and then pass these flyers out to all their neighbors is where I spend a large majority of my time trying to figure that out. And so what we use, we don't have any budget for marketing, so we beg the newspapers to put in our press releases. We use our local county agents that have a connection with them. If I can hit them from the Groundwater Conservation District to the agent, through the health department, through us, and they all get asked to put in this free press release, then maybe they'll eventually be annoyed enough to they'll put it in there. County agents have typically a weekly radio spot, and so we'll work with them on that. And then we do have support from our groundwater conservation districts and environmental groups, and they can help maybe pay ads to get those in the newspapers. That may be a little bit prettier site, catch their eye a little easier than a Word document. And so social media, I'm trying to work my way through that, trying to reach as many folks as I can, just trying from every angle to get across to them. From my experience, which is pretty limited, is Facebook. I see more interaction with the well owners. They can ask questions, they can reach out. Twitter, I seem to have success with other state agencies or organizations, and they maybe figure out or find out that we're coming to an area through Twitter, and then they can start reaching out to their clientele through that. So there's been some success by using this. And then we started developing a newsletter, an e-letter that we send out email through anybody that's attended our program that's requested to opt into this, and then go to our website and sign up. And we just send links, basically. It's not a lot of stories or words through there, but any information, sending it to the private well class or anything along those lines that may help the well owners, to send these links to them. Program duration, Diane touched on this. I won't go too far, but that's one thing lessons as we learned going through this process. She said we had two main types, but we have maybe 3 or 4 variations from those two types. So we have a lot of different programs that we're ready to push forward based on the clientele that they tell us. So I really lean on that local involvement to tell me what type of program they think would be the best to get those folks to come to the program. Whether it's, and you would think 6 hours, that's where we started out, and we started cutting down the time, but now I'm getting requests, please come for 6 hours. The group wants the whole program. And so it just depends on where we're at in the state. So it may be from 6 hours in that retirement group, then 6 hours isn't long enough to talk to them, and they're hanging on. And then with certain areas that we have to go after work, after they come to work, so 2 hours in the evening. We kind of get worked up sometimes or feel like they're missing out a lot of that information, but they don't know what information they're missing out. And if we can plant that seed and get those main points across, then we think it's a success with that. And we talked about this. This has been shown multiple times, but this drives crowds really, really great. I mean, if we have an event that we're going to go help out, so this water quality issue in the news, then we'll come and it gets people's attention, gets their attention, and gets them coming to our program. So we'll come and help with a flood event, and they came just because their well got flooded, but then maybe they realize that this is something we need to do each year, whether my well's flooded or not, we need to get it tested. So good opportunities. Engaging the well owner, outside of just our workshop events, we've created publications that we go through. We had a set of publications that we've started, and then what questions do I keep getting asked that I can start giving publications out to that maybe answer those questions. And so we have a series of publications. We have our handbook that we hand out. We bring all these to our workshops, but at the same time, we give these to the local groundwater conservation district, the local county offices, so that they can distribute these information out. And we put it on our website. I think that's the next. We really lessons learned as an example of changing. We started out with this website that no one was wanting to visit. It didn't have a lot of information to come get answers from, or at least it wasn't easy to find. And so we made it to where they could come and very easily answer the questions that they were looking for, and we're still working on changing that as we go through that. But that's one thing we've changed. Is here's our publications. What answers are you looking for? And here's how to get that information to them. Another way we engage well owners outside of workshop is our social media, and I discussed that. So I fly through the end there. And is there any questions? That's all the program.
Hi, Frida from Minnesota. I'm curious if you do anything focused for limited English proficient individuals or families.
So we do. Folks, areas that's not speaking English as their first, and we have South Texas. I don't know how many publications do we have that we've translated into Spanish. We have quite a few. If not, it's not all, but it's almost. And so we've actually translated those through to Spanish. Not our handbook. It's not been.
No, our handbook hasn't, but most of the fact sheets have already been translated into Spanish. And we haven't utilized it too much because it's by request from the audience generally and through the agent. But when we get down into more Spanish-speaking areas, for example, in South Texas, Extension always has the option of asking an interpreter to be there to work with us at the same time. And it slows things down, but that's always available. They've just never requested it. And we have gone into some Spanish-speaking areas. In South Texas, they're frequently bilingual, and so they're comfortable often just with the English. So, but yeah, we are ready for that. And our Spanish-speaking population, of course, is increasing in Texas, and so we anticipate getting more and more of our fact sheets. Although I think we really do have most of them done already. It's kind of just the new ones that we need to make sure to take that step to have that translation done. And then it would be nice to get the handbook done. It's a 96-page challenge, but it could be done. So thanks for the idea.
This isn't a question. Crystal from North Carolina. I noticed that you go on a lot of social media to look for ways to contact homeowners. And there's this new website, Nextdoor. I'm not sure if you've heard of that.
So
yeah.
Is that, I don't know if you have go further than that, but I've tried. I didn't talk about that. But so that exact picture that I showed with the subdivision that all had water well, I actually attempted to go through Nextdoor to reach out and show them about the workshop, and I have not had any luck. I've contacted Nextdoor, and they said that's not available for extension right now, but that's something they're working on, is what they told me, or they'll consider, which I took as no, and we're not going to think about it. But if anybody has,
to get on Nextdoor, you have to live there.
Yeah, but I was thinking maybe trying to contact a member within there to get buy-in.
I spent embarrassing amount of time trying to contact somebody that lived in that subdivision to get them on Nextdoor, and so it didn't click on that our last program, but that I am aware, and that'd be because that one way to shoot out a lot of information would be very helpful.
All right, thank you guys.